Now this is possibly the most tricky point, the hardest to follow. If any of you study in physics, then the principle should be clear to you, as the uncertainty principle, which relates to a number of things that happen in physics. Most commonly cited as an example of the uncertainty principle is that there are some things that if you measure one very precisely, then you can't measure the other quantity very precisely. And if you measure this one more precisely, then this one you can't measure as precisely. Usually they cite the momentum and position of a particle. They say if you know exactly where an item is, you can't be sure of how much momentum it has. If you can measure exactly the momentum, you can't be sure of exactly where it is. See, the precision here makes this fuzzy, or if you make this precise, this gets fuzzy. Well, that's what happens in this case of the inspiration of the Bible. And it works in this way. If we know what the Bible means, then we don't know how much of it came from God. On the other hand, if we believe that all of it came from God, that is, we measure, we say this came from God, then we can't be sure what it means. You follow that? I'll explain why. But the point is, if you are sure of the meaning, you can't be sure how much of it is divinely inspired. If you're sure that this is the quantity that is divinely inspired, you can't be sure what it all means. Why? Well, in the first case, if you say the Bible means this, then you have a large collection of verses, chapters, that don't say anything about this meaning. And you have Luther's problem, who said, well, I know the Bible means this, so where it says this, it must be God's Word. But all these places that don't even talk about that subject, you don't know what to say about them. They don't mention this thing which gives the status of divine revelation to words, so are they revealed or not? Can't be sure. They don't touch on this subject, which is the key to identifying revelation. On the other hand, if we say, no, all of this is inspired, then we can't be sure what it means, for this reason. If you say all of this is inspired, then I point to a place and say, but this disagrees with this part. What's the meaning of that? To me it means human error. What's it mean to you? People have to come up with a meaning which enables them to hold it all together. They have to assign a meaning. They have to say, well, it could mean this, it could mean that. But they can't be sure. Because in order to be sure that this is the meaning of these conflicts, they'd have to be able to point to a verse somewhere in the Bible that tells you that's what this conflict means. A place where God says, by the way, in Matthew chapter 4, you'll find a disagreement with Luke chapter 4. What I meant to tell you was this, in that place. You don't find that. See, if you did, there wouldn't be any of these conflicts. Because people could always say, this seems to disagree with this, and somebody else would say, no, here's the verse that explains that. Can't be done. There is no Bible solution that is indicated to these conflicts in many cases. Now, there's a tight little circle that some people go in. You'll find it, for example, in the introduction to what is called the Living Bible, which is a paraphrase of the Bible. That is, it's not just a translation, but then the translation has the thoughts of the editor included on certain subjects, adding a lot of words and so on. That's what a paraphrase is, and it's admitted. It says on the cover, usually, this is a paraphrase. But in the introduction to the Living Bible, the authors or translators say that, of course, they recognize that if you are translating something but you're adding your own thoughts, this could be dangerous. They admit that. They say, but, they tell our readers, don't worry, because we have always been guided when we added our own thoughts by a strict evangelical position. They don't seem to realize they've gone in a circle. This school of thought called evangelism in Christianity came from these interpretations. That is, people said, we are evangelists because we believe that this means that, and this means this, and this means that. Then years later, they say, now we'll translate the Bible, and you can be sure of our meaning because we stick to evangelical meanings. Well, evangelism grew from giving these meanings, and you've come full circle. Now, as it happens, of course, sometimes people will try to tell you that, as I said, they forget their apology that any conflicts in the Bible just came from miscopying. They'll try to tell you, any mistake you show, any conflict, this against that, we've got an answer for it. They'll often try to tell you that. And they have an answer for a lot of these things, and that's good research, fine. But they tend very often to believe that there is an answer for everything. Even though they haven't answered everything, they've answered a lot of problems. And usually, in regard to the illustration I'm using here, this is how it goes. When you cite the conflict between Matthew and Luke on this temptation story, and they'll tell you, well, you see, the key is here in the introduction to the account according to Luke. Luke said when he started to write that he was writing everything accurately. So you see, Matthew didn't write accurately. Luke did. The key is there. That if we have a doubt, if Matthew disagrees with Luke, then we should take Luke if we want to be accurate, because Luke said, mine is accurate. So that is often the answer. In the same way, the Gospel according to Mark is corrected by Luke. In Mark chapter 6, verse 8, you have instructions on an occasion being delivered by Jesus. It's Mark 6 and 8. And Jesus is telling them what to take with them when they go. Mostly tells them what not to take. He says, don't take this and don't take that, and be sure you take this, and so on. But in Mark 6 and 8, he says, take a staff with you, a stick. In Luke chapter 9, verse 3, same episode, Jesus says, don't take anything, don't take a stick in particular. He says, do not take a staff. Well, we have two versions of the same story. Take a staff, don't take a staff. So again, I suppose a person might say, well, Luke is accurate. He's the one who said he's accurate, so he overrules Mark. Well, so far, you're sort of solving your problems. But now what do you do when you come to a place where Matthew and Mark disagree with each other, and Luke doesn't say anything about it? Which one of them is accurate? You have as an example Matthew chapter 27, verse 34, as compared to Mark chapter 15, verse 23. In one place, it says they gave Jesus wine to drink, and they put vinegar in it. The other place says, no, they sweetened it. Well, which did they do? You look up the episode in Luke, no comment, doesn't say anything about the episode, so which one of these stories is true? We know that we can't trust Matthew or Mark to be accurate because Luke is accurate. But now these two have different versions, and Luke doesn't straighten us out. So it doesn't work. Now, I'm afraid very often it seems Muslims want to put the most emphasis on this kind of thing, to say, I have some verses I can really show somebody the mistakes he has. Well, fine, but you have to be able to go somewhere after this. Be ready for what people tell you after this. Usually what they will stress, I can almost promise it will happen this way, is that after you've had quite a session like this to try to tell somebody, look, these things are in disagreement, this doesn't do the job, and so on, what do you say to that? Usually we fall back to another idea, which comes from 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 6. It's in this place, they will quote it to you. It's in this place where Paul says that it's the Spirit that gives life, it's the letter that kills. And what they mean to tell you by that is to say, see what your problem is. You're trying to pin down the letter perfect Bible. And Paul said, if you do that, you see, you kill everything. It's the spirit of it that matters. That's the part that gives life. Never mind the fine details. It's the spirit. Why was it said, and what does it sort of mean to tell us over and above all of these conflicts? Well, really, a person who brings that up as a counter-argument to what you say ought to be fined for something, I think, that is so outrageous. Because that is your complaint against them. It is they who said the Bible is letter perfect. And when you try to show it isn't letter perfect, they say you shouldn't try to show it's letter perfect. You should just take the spirit of it. You see, that's their problem, not your problem. It's they who have put themselves in this position. And again, I must stress, this is an element of Christianity. This is the kind you see on television Sunday mornings, usually. By and large, most Christian churches will tell you the same thing as the Muslim says.